Finitron. Picture perfect.
China as a nation has done a great job for itself in the last 3 decades economically. They've gone from having a per capita income of $200 in 1980s to more than $10,000 today. They've lifted around 800 million people from extreme poverty in the last 3 decades and have an annual trade surplus of around $500 billion. But with all the luster of the big numbers we see above, a lot of financial planners and common people alike advised to copy the Chinese model to countries like India and Indonesia. And as it is with everything in life, what sounds logical isn't always beneficial. A lot of things had to come together in order to create the economic giant that China is. And while we can learn the basic principles of policy making from China, copying them is not a good idea. But the question is why? Why can't India and Indonesia copy the Chinese model to achieve their own economic goals? To answer this question, we have to travel a bit, and our first destination would be 1980s America. The America of 80s was ailing with economic recession. In 1979, the country saw a fuel crisis because of instability in the Middle East, which eventually led to economic downturn of America. Inflation rates jumped from 3.2% average since World War II to 13.5% in 1980s. And while America was losing ground on the economic front, one of its own allies was growing exponentially, even threatening American hegemony. That ally was Japan. Japan had seen explosive growth since the end of World War II. The Japanese companies, empowered by their strong work culture and emphasis on equality and innovation, led Japan to become the second largest economy in the world. This was a particular concern for America since Japan not only excelled in innovative technologies like displays and semiconductors, but also in traditional sectors like automotive, which took away employment from American people. In order to combat the rising competition from Japan, America had to look away from their shores, since manufacturing became expensive at home. Right at this time, China, under the leadership of Deng Xiaoping, opened the Chinese economy for the world. The Sino American relations were already deepening since America saw them as a counter to the Soviet Union. So, in order to regain the market captured by the Japanese conglomerates, American companies started investing billions of dollars in China to set up factories and produce for the world. This was the start of export of industries from America to China. American companies literally exported jobs from America in order to save costs, and while this made things cheaper for the average American, the country lost a wealthy middle class that created wealth by working blue collar jobs. And America also lost its ability to produce goods. One might wonder how stupid America was to literally export all of its industries to a country which was ideologically opposite and also a potential competitor. But in order to understand the decisions, we have to take our attention away from economics a bit and look at what happened to the West socially and geopolitically during the 1990s. At first, investing in China was motivated by America looking to beat Japanese companies by getting cheap labor and less regulation. Another factor was to counter Soviet Union. But after the fall of Soviet Union in 1990s, the worldview of the West was unbelievably optimistic. For example, in 1992, Francis Fukuyama published a book called The End of History and the Last Man, in which he posited that the liberal capitalism had proved to be the best ideology in the world, and the wars and balance of power struggle would gradually decline as the world united under that ideology. It might seem very naive right now, but the West was optimistic for good reasons. The West had seen exponential growth after the World War II because of liberal capitalism, and the life was better, more comfortable, and peaceful than ever. Now comes the climax of this story. The unbelievable optimism led America and the European Union to export not only the industries but also the technological know how to China, by which they created their own competitors. But the America and Europe of today are very aware of this reality. We can see this in the actions taken by America and Europe to become more protectionist towards their economies. Trade war with China is also the symptom of that realization. America has literally exported its blue collar jobs, which has created a wealth disparity between the middle class and the rich classes, which has led to instability and election of personalities like Trump, who used this divide to gain power. In the realization of such realities, it's a given that the West will be careful to not create another adversary by their own hands. Hence, copying the Chinese model by India and Indonesia may lead to more open markets and hence a better economy, but reaching the scale and technological level which China achieved will not be possible anymore. The bottom line is that every economic miracle has a few fundamentals and a few peculiars. While India and others like it can learn the fundamentals, the peculiars of a time period have to be dealt with the tools available to a country instead of copying it from others.